All right, so good morning once again. Um, for the next 5 weeks, we'll be discussing human resource information systems. Fortunately for me, I taught you management information systems, and this is now for this lecture, we are trying to now narrow it down to your field of specialty, as you guys are HR officers or HR managers. So, unlike MIS, where we look at the broad information systems domain. Now we are trying to see how or what specific IS you as a human resource manager can utilize to help with your day-to-day activities. And that is why we narrow it down to human resource information systems, typically being systems or platforms that helps the day-to-day administration of the HR practices or activities. So this is actually more of a practical thing because if I say practical, I don't mean you're going to code or do any other stuff, but I mean practical because it's something that most of you can relate with. As um, in your organizations, you have some HR platforms that or HR systems that is utilized to help manage the HR practices and HR activities. So for this particular session for the next 5 weeks, we'll just try to have an overview of technology in HR, which we'll do this morning, where we'll talk about IS, HR, and what HRIS means. We'll try to also talk about the various, the key HR activities that we have, transaction activities, transformation activities, among others. When we get there, we'll discuss them into detail. We also talk about the evolution of HR and how that feeds into HRIS. Um, Previously, the HR function was just being thought of as a function that just includes, that mainly centers on hiring. So when you hear, oh, this is the HR for this organization, you just think that he's the person responsible for recruitment and selection. But now we see that the HR function has evolved and moved beyond basic recruitment and selection to talking about several other things which we'll capture as we move. So we are talking about HR administration, where now the HR is now involved in payroll activities, updating employees' payroll, all those things forming part of the HR function, as well as you have functions like talent management, where the HR is responsible for identifying talent. Even once you bring them in, he's responsible for coming out with programs and others to help make sure that these staff are uplifted in terms of their talent. So we'll talk about talent management and HR planning as we move. And also the static HR function known as recruitment and selection. However, we'll talk about recruitment and selection in the internet context because now we see that a lot of firms are just moving beyond the basic recruitment and selection where they float out adverts on a daily graphic and then they ask you to apply. Now, even I remember some few months back, the US Embassy was talking about utilizing social media activity to understand the social media activities of people who apply for US visa. Why? Because they feel that if they're able to track your social media activity or know what to do on social media, they know the kind of human being you are. And they would have to now decide if they want to admit such a person in their into their country. And this is also what these are stuff that organizations also utilize. Now, before an organization recruits you, in most cases, they try to do a background check on you. Doing this background check will let them understand what kind of a person they are recruiting into the organization. Mind you, we are agents of the organization, right? We are supposed to uphold some ethical standards. So they try to understand what activities you do online. Because now everybody has an online profile and there are some activities that you undertake online. So they get to know who you are, maybe your network, get to understand the kind of stuff that you post online and several other things about you. And then they decide if they want to recruit such a character or such a personality into, into their organization. Then Aside that, we also talk about training and development, and this actually moves or has a link with talent management. Yes, the HR manager is responsible for identifying talent, but once you bring the talent in, yes, it's your job to ensure that you also try to uplift their how do you call it, their features, certain things that they need to do to be able to enhance their ability to work and then provide some source of competitive advantage for the firm. Aside that, even when you recruit people on the normal, when you do your recruitment and selection, employees will have to go through some level of training. So they are at least familiar or know what they are supposed to do in the organization. I bet we all have gone through some level of orientation, which is, I think that's a word that is popularly used. That let's go through some orientation. Let's orientate the employees that we have recruited so they understand how things are done in the workplace. So we'll try to understand how HRIS fits into the domain of training and development. And also, we'll conclude with how we can build our human resource information systems. So just like IS, we are not just like MIS, sorry. We are not just looking at having to build any HRIS and then come and then dump that to employees to use. We have to ensure that there's some level of cohesion, there's some level of consistency, and some level of participation between us and the employees. If I say us, I mean the employees. If you are thinking of bringing in an HRIS, then you have to ensure that the employees who are primary stakeholders of that platform are involved in the building of such a system. So we'll talk about how we can build HRIs. We'll discuss the various systems development methodologies that are available to help us build our HRIs. We'll talk about how we can collect data to be able to help us develop our HRIs. And we'll also highlight the essence of the human element, the human element here being stakeholders of the system and how it influences our adoption of HRIs, how we build HRIs, as well as how we can procure HRIs. So basically, this is what we'll be doing for the next 5 weeks, God willing. And then we'll start with today's lecture that gives us an overview of technology in HR. So I think we can go this way. Okay, so yeah, so we'll start with an overview of technology in HR. And for this lecture, we just try to understand the basics of data, information, and an information system. We'll try to also discuss the categories of an information system, and that will feed into the HR function as well as HRIS and how it has evolved. We also try to understand the value of HRIS to organizations, and also try to understand the factors that promote HRIS adoption and use in organizations. So we know this data, information, what a system is, what an information system is, and the various components of an information system, being data, hardware, software, telecommunication networks, as well as people. And I emphasize that people are a very critical component in every information system. I think we got that from the MIS class, that without people, the system becomes useless because people will have to be trained on how to use the system. People will have to accept the system, right? People would have to work with the system. And if these guys are not in line with the adoption of any system, then the system is bound to fail. You remember we discussed in MIS, we discussed something like implementary assets. And we spoke about the fact that it's just not about adopting technology, but it's about adopting technology and complementing that adoption with some other key assets. And we spoke about the fact that people are a key asset. So if you're adopting technology, you also have to make sure that you put in the various mechanisms to train people on how to use the system. So we have the data, we have networks, we have software, hardware, we have people, and then we have processes, which are a set of activities that we perform with these eyes to achieve various tasks or various functions. So we know an information system, the fact that it has the input, processing, and output cycle, which is used by both the internal environment and the external environment. Internally, we know who use them, our employees, the organization within its internal environment. And at the external, we're looking at our suppliers, our customers using it, certain regulatory agencies using it, some stockholders who are concerned about investing into our business, and our competitors who want to know how we are doing, what we are doing, then to benchmark that against themselves and see what they can do to improve their activities. So there are several categories of information systems. I believe we discussed this in MIs. There are several others. We have the transaction processing system, we have the management information system, we have the decision support systems, we have some intelligence systems that includes the business intelligence system as well. And we have systems that help us to automate our office that looks at like the word processes, the Excels, the PowerPoint, amongst others, that helps us to automate office processes. We also have the collaborative systems that helps us to connect with each other. In organizations, employees are looking at up to collaborate so that they can achieve several objectives. I mean, shared objectives in this case. And collaborative technologies help in that. So collaborative technologies like Zoom. So we have Zoom here today. I'm not being able to physically be present in Tamale, but at least we are able to collaborate. We are able to enhance or still continue teaching and learning using a collaborative software like Zoom. Then we have human resource information system, which falls part of the categories of an information system. And we're looking at a platform that helps us to manage, that helps us to process employee data, that helps us to store employee data, and that helps us to perform several HR-related activities or functions, right? So I just not looking at one thing. We are looking at a platform that helps us to achieve a set of HR-related functions or activities. So these functions or activities could include managing employee data. It could include the payroll cycle. It could include several other things that the organization deems fit, but that fall in line with the HR function. And most now we are moving on from systems that are just static systems to systems that are now cloud-based platforms. Cloud-based in the sense that we have our data stored over the internet, such that when there are issues with our systems, we can still access the data that is captured on the platform. Sorry. So we know HR. That's because we are HR students. So it's actually something that I will not delve into explaining. But there are core functions with the HR role, right? As I mentioned, the static HR role has just been on recruitment, hiring, and selection. At first, that's how it was. Before we now had an evolution with the HR function. So core functions of the HR is recruitment and hiring. But now we've moved beyond that to include employee training and development, issues of performance management. In most organizations, they have performance management or appraisals probably every quarter or semi-annually. Some of the organizations, they have them annually, where you are appraised based on some key targets. That's why for some organizations, they have some key targets for employees. I think in the banking sector, they have specific targets that you need to meet, probably every quarter or semi-annually. They sit down to reflect to see if you've been able to meet those targets, to find out what obstacles you actually encountered that at least derailed your attainment of such targets. and what can be done going forward. Some organizations, at the end of the year, if they feel that you've not been forthright, you've not been able to achieve the targets that were set, at least at the beginning of the year, some might take a decision to lay you off, depending on how bad things are. And also the issue of compensation and benefits. And in fact, this is where we get happy as employees. Because in as much as possible, we are all in for the compensation and benefits. We get up at 8 or get up at 7, go to work, because at the end of the month, we know controller will credit our accounts. Even though that money doesn't step out of the bank, we all know that that salary ends in the bank. Or will I say it ends at the ATM machine? But we work because we anticipate that we are going to be compensated at the end of the month. So the HR, one of the core functions of the HR is determining compensations and benefits to employees. How much are they supposed to take on a monthly basis? Well, in the public sector, that is in line with the single spine salary structure, right? So for some organizations, they use a certificate to peg you against a single spine. Some, yes, certificates count, but I think as you move, they consider more of experience and years in service to upgrade, promote you, and then put you on a particular salary structure. In some organizations, they also give out certain benefits like overtime. That's because this falls outside the normal compensation. So you're supposed to work 8 to 5, but you work beyond 5 p.m. And how much are you supposed to be paid in overtime? It's the HR's job to at least liaise with the finance to calculate these things and then see how much the employee or the employees are due. And there are several other benefits that come up that probably will not form part of the mainstream compensation or salary. And it's something that's determined by the HR. So like in some organizations, I'm aware you are paid clothing allowances or some clothing benefits, probably at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, or probably in the middle of the year, depending on when the organization has funds to pay that. And several other benefits that come but are not part of the mainstream salary structure. And also the HR function also revolves around employee relations, extremely key. Some of us actually hate weekdays because we have a toxic environment in our organization. We get to work and we don't have good relations with some or most of our colleagues at the workplace. I think I've always maintained that for me, the piece to enjoying my work is the fact that I see everybody at my workplace as a colleague and not a friend. I think this is something that maybe some of us can also utilize. We go to the workplace and we try to create friendships there. We try to create relationships there. And in the end, that becomes a downfall for most of us. My job is to go to whatever workstation I have, undertake whatever activities or functions that have been assigned to me, and go home to my family. It's as simple as it is. Some of us go to work, we try to create friends there, we try to create some clique there, like a group there. Let's go for a party, let's meet on the weekend, let's have fun. And that always, in most cases, don't end well. Because now what happens? We end up relating our personal stories to them. And then with the least opportunity they get, they try to sell us out based on some personal experiences or stuff we have mentioned to them. So it's the HR's function to do what? To ensure that the work environment is not toxic, it's friendly, and people relate very well with each other so that they can at least undertake whatever activities or tasks that have been given to them. And also compliance with labor laws. There are several labor laws in the country that the HR's job is to ensure that the organization and the employees also have some compliance with several labor laws, especially laws regarding employing people with some disabilities, caring for them, and several others, even laws regarding the actions of the organization and employees and how it affects the environment. All these things are stuff that the HR manager has the duty to ensure that is compliance with these labor laws. And also workplace policies and the culture. We say culture is the life of a particular people. There's a culture in every organization, how things are done. In some organizations, they actually do not tolerate lateness. In some organizations, they expect that they have a dress code, right? So on Monday, you wear a suit. On Tuesday, you wear this. On Fridays, you have to wear an African print or any African wear. So there's a culture, there's a way things are done. They come to work as early as 8, everybody is in there, and probably as late as 5 p.m., everybody locks out. And also there are policies that govern how things are done in the workplace, right? So it's the HR function, it's the HR job to ensure that you adhere to policies and then you also fall in line with the culture of the organization. So the HR activities are mainly spread across 3 key activities. We say that yes, the HR manager is supposed to perform these functions. However, the HR activities are spread or categorized into 3 broad streams, where we have the transaction activities, we have the traditional activities, and we have the transformational activities. In terms of transaction, we say that it's the HR's job to conduct several day-to-day activities. What are some of these day-to-day activities? Updating people, the records of your employees. These are things that you do on a daily. Having to think of payroll. These are things that you do daily. So whatever activities that the HR function or the HR unit performs on a daily, they're broadly classified under transactional activities. So we just go back to the core functions of the HR and ask ourselves, which of these activities are undertaken on a regular basis? It doesn't mean it has to be every day, but on a regular basis, what are some of the activities that are carried out by the HR function? And we also have the traditional activities. And this is actually the mother of HR activities because, as I mentioned earlier, the traditional or the static HR activity includes recruitment and selection. That's because as an HR manager, you have that power. So in most cases, when we hear that, how do you call it, slots have been given for recruitment or clearance have been given for recruitment, we see that the HR's function job is now up there. He's now a big man. And everybody's calling, oh, HR manager, HR manager. I have a candidate and several other things, right? And we have the transformational activities that add value to the organization. As an HR manager, you're also looking at how you can adopt innovative ways or innovative technologies to transform your HR activities, to add value to the activities that are performed in the organization. It might include adopting a technology. It might include bettering a technology. It might even include having to train people on the use of a technology. But as an HR manager, you are someone who should be looking into the future, thinking of adding value to whatever activities that are performed in the organization, which could be mainly looking at technological resources that are available to ensure that you add value to the organization. So now we see that as part of the HR function, we have something that we call knowledge management, which has led into what we call knowledge management systems, where we have now we have the HR manager looking at how can we harness knowledge, how can we store knowledge in this organization, because we understand that people are not going to be with us forever. We are going to have people who retire. Unfortunately, we are going to have people who lose their lives. And these are bright minds. So how are we able to store whatever knowledge they have? So in most cases, we have systems that help us to be able to what? To store some key information or some key data that can be used for future resources. Also, people have gone for workshops or certain programs. Now the HR manager is concerned about what have you learned there? Can you give us a report on what you've learned? We've developed a Google Drive link. Please upload that resource there so that in the future we can utilize such a resource if the need be. Right? So all these are knowledge management activities, and using technologies are the systems that helps us to be able to manage knowledge within an organization, which forms part of the transformational activities that add value to the organization. So all this feeds into HRIs, right? And I just remember basically explaining what an HRIS is when we looked at the categories of an information system. So we're looking at a system that supports HR processes and functions, right? You just see some dashboard to your right regarding an HRIS platform. So employees can log in, they can update their records, they can apply for leave, whatever it is, steady leave, leave of absence, maternity leave. Now, as men, we also now enjoy paternity leave, which I feel should be increased from I don't know how many months or weeks but I know they give us weeks. I think we also deserve a paternity leave of at least 3 months so we can also help at home and enjoy our rest. Anyway, so employees can go in there and do a lot of things. The HR manager can also go in there and do a lot of things. The heads of units or heads of department can go in there and do performance appraisals amongst others, right? So any system that helps us to be able to do this remotely, we can broadly classify them as an HRIs because they help in supporting HR processes and HR function. And also, as I mentioned, this also includes it involves people and processes, which are central to every information system. Yes, so we are saying that every IS involves people and processes. People who need to control the system, people who need to use the system, people who need to maximum benefit from the use of the system. Also, we have a system being a repository to store whatever data we want them to store. That's because we store a lot of data when it comes to HRI. So we store mainly employee data. And as I said, people go in there to update their records, to delete their records, among others. So this is a repository that stores data and also mainly data about employees, and also helps us to distribute that information. So I think I discussed this and how the HR function has, or the HR role has evolved from just recruitment and selection, looking at compliance and just focusing on employees, to now moving into a more flexible approach, right? That includes training and development, that includes you having to even recruit using technologies and the internet context. Now, when people even go for interviews, some of them are able to be interviewed online. Also, even in terms of aptitude tests, now we no longer need to have people coming into the organization to sit physically to write an aptitude test. Now, all these things can be done online. As soon as you submit your test, you are graded and you are given a score immediately. So once you fall below the threshold, you know you've not passed to the next stage, and several others. So in terms of how do you call it? In terms of the function, it has moved from just being a static employee forecasting to just talking about recruitment and selection and maintaining employee records, to now being more of having to train people, having to embed technological components into your operations and your HR activities. And also even looking at your customers, because we always say the customer is right. So as part of the HR function, we have that issue of also looking at your customer, because you also have to consider whatever feedback your customer would have regarding the service that has been rendered to them. And these services are rendered by employees. And I've mentioned that some of us don't visit places, organizations, or even buy from people because of how their employees treated us. when we went in there to get these things, right? And also in terms of technologies, we've moved and we now have sophisticated HRI that helps us to be able to perform the HR function. It has moved from just being a static website to now being a mobile platform and a flexible platform. So now some of you have, well, you have login details for your HRIS. With your mobile device, you're able to log in and you're able to do whatever you are supposed to do. You no longer need to visit the website or something else. We've moved beyond that. And also now this real-time processing where once you just update your records, immediately it works. You no longer need to wait for a longer period of time before this thing. So we see that the HR function keeps on evolving, especially in the era of AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, now AI is now embedded into several HR functions. And now we ask ourselves the question, what's going to happen to employees? Are we going to have that era where employees will not be needed? Well, we'll get to see if we only live up until then. But now we see what is happening. You move into banks and Western countries, and you only just see the bulk teller and probably a customer relation manager or something. Because now everything is now done virtually. Now, even in terms of customer relationship, we have a chatbot, which is an artificial intelligence app that customers can interact with. So you go onto DSTV platform, you want to make a payment, you have an issue. They just tell you on top there that click on this WhatsApp logo to have a chat with Akia, who is our chatbot. You click and it directs you to WhatsApp and you start having a conversation with Akia. That's not a human being, that's a chatbot, an AI chatbot that you have a conversation with. If that chatbot cannot solve your issue, then that chatbot tells you that please or kindly call this toll-free number for further assistance. And then you now call the physical human being for that. But that thing is also evolving. Very soon, it will not let you call anybody because very soon it will be able to solve whatever stuff that you ask it, whatever need that you want it to help you with. And that becomes a danger to employees. So we say that as an employee, if you don't also evolve, if you don't also try to learn how to use these systems or these platforms, then there's going to be a problem. There's going to be a state where you might be cut off. And that's going to be a problem. As to whether we will live long enough to get to that stage, we only live to see. All right. So we're looking at the value that HRIS adds to organizations, and we can classify them under three broad spectrums, where we talk about it automating our HR processes, right? So there are several processes within the HR domain, and we are looking at automating them, i.e., moving them from the manual process to the digitized process. That's what we term by automate. So instead of having to do things manually, instead of having to take physical letters, moving from office to office, now things can be done online. I can just sit in the comfort of my home, log into the HRIS, and send a message to the HR manager regarding me wanting a leave. I can just sit at the comfort of my home and apply for a steady leave or apply for a 2 weeks leave to at least write my exams. I no longer need to write a letter, take it to someone to minute the letter, take it to another person to minute on the letter. No. So one of the key ways that an HRIS adds value to organization is to help automate our business process and also provide accurate and timely information. Accuracy in a sense that we keep on telling employees, once you move from one accommodation or one location to another, please update that. Let us know where you live now. Let us know your current email address. Let us know your current phone number. So you see that you have up-to-date, accurate information about your employees, right? And this is provided at the right time that is needed. So that you don't have an issue where you are trying to reach out to an employee, but on the system, what you have is the old number of the employee, or the old email address that doesn't work, or the old residential address or PO box that no longer functions. And also it helps in providing new forms of information. As I mentioned, Organizations are also able to put whatever information they want their employees to have on the HRIs. And that makes our life easy. So we're looking at providing various forms of information to employees. So there's an update on a holiday, we put it there. There's an update, there's a meeting or there's a workshop that needs to be done on a particular week, we put it there. And it's embedded into the calendar of our employees. So our employees are able to see and know that we're going to have a workshop from August 15th to August 18th, amongst others. All right. So we've just finished discussing some of the key ways that an HRIS can add value to organization. But there are certain factors that lead organizations to adopt and use HRIs. Like sometimes you look at the size of the organization. Mostly when organizations are expanding in terms of size, they see the need to adopt certain sophisticated technologies to help automate their processes. That's because as you expand in size, the processes become numerous. The activities you are supposed to perform would increase. And as such, you would have to rely on various technologies to help you to streamline such activities. If not, you have issues. You'll not be able to manage all these things. So sometimes the size of the organization, once the organization is expanding in terms of size, then they feel there's a need for them to adopt several HRIs to be able to streamline or automate their HR processes. And also the level of top management support and commitment. Even in MIS, we spoke about this, that if the top management does not support whatever technology that you want to adopt, there's going to be a problem. In fact, there are even those supposed to first come out with the idea of adopting innovative ways to carry out business activities. So if you have top management that don't support or that are not in line with adopting innovative ways to do things, there's going to be a problem. For some of us in our organizations, we have these issues where every day we have issues with the top management because we feel they are not innovative enough. We feel they are too static. We feel that there are several other things that we can do better, but it's like they are not in support of them. They're not committed to do that. And as such, the organization is not growing as it's supposed to grow. And also, you're looking at the availability of resources. Let's be sincere. Adopting any technology comes with resources, specifically financial resources. It's not as if these technologies are given on the free. If you are employing the services of people to build these platforms or systems, you have to pay them. Technologies don't come on the cheap. So the availability of resources will determine if you adopt these HRIs or not. And sometimes your HR philosophy, right? How you intend to do things. If you have a positive and an open-minded HR philosophy, then you are also open to, that means that you are open to adopting key ways, innovative ways that transform the HR process. And also managerial competence. Let's also look at our HOUs and our HODs, the competence of these guys. Because frequently, these guys are those that engage with top management. If the person is not competent, if the person is not open-minded, if the person is not accommodating and accepts these innovative ways of doing things, then it's going to be difficult for such a person to relay the essence of adopting HRIs to the top management for approval, for commitment, or for support. And also employees and your ability to motivate employees. Mainly employees will feel that technologies are coming to take up their jobs. And they might not be so accommodating or welcoming of these technologies. So in most cases, your ability to tell them that, look, please, don't be down. These are the reasons why we are adopting these technologies. This is what it's coming to do. It's coming to rather help you. It's coming to streamline some activities that you do. It's coming to help you improve your productivity. So your ability to motivate them, tell them several key benefits that they are going to drive from you and you, the business or organization adopting and using this technology, would also lead to helping you adopt this technology. Okay. So there are also several advantages and disadvantages when it comes to adopting HRIs, right? We are looking at, in fact, in most cases, organizations will adopt technologies because they want to do what? They want to increase their level of competitiveness. Extremely key. Huh? extremely, extremely key. But we have to understand that just adopting technologies does not necessarily lead to, how do you call it, competitiveness. There are several issues that come on board. Also, we're also looking at timeliness and quality of decision making, and also streamlining or enhancing the efficiency of the HR function, and several other advantages that come with you adopting the HRIs. And also, there are several risks that come with adopting HRIs. Um, Sometimes we are looking at issues of privacy, security, because there's a lot of data that's going to be in there. And sometimes, because there's a lot of data going to be in there, people are concerned who has access to the data and who has not got access to the data. Especially when you are looking at cloud-based HRIs, where you have the data stored over the internet. There's going to be a problem. Who has access to this data we have there? Because you have data, the HRIs houses data about employees, their residential address, their email address, their marital status, the name of their wives, the next of kin, several others. And people hold dear to their hearts this kind of how do you call it, data, their date of birth. In fact, I've always said that the Ghanaian man is so concerned. In fact, he's so private about his date of birth. It's something personal to us, right? So issues of privacy and concern, privacy and security concerns are things that we have to look at. Sometimes when people feel that technologies are being adopted, they feel that they have to just put up all the burden to the technology. So it reduces performance, right? Yes, it reduces performance. Now look at what is happening. You give assignments, students just go into AI. Put the questions you've asked them into the AI. The AI gives them the response. They just copy that and they paste and they give it to you. They don't even read to understand what is being given, what output is being given by the AI. We understand that these AI tools hallucinate a lot. In fact, most of the time, it gives some false reportage or output. Students don't care. They just copy, paste, and give it to the lecturer. It's the lecturer's job to read and make sense out of the output. And it reduces the intellect and the performance of the human brain. So a student gets a B or a student gets an F, comes back to the lecturer and doesn't understand why he or she scored an F. It's because garbage in, garbage out. Some don't even waste their time to format, at least ensure that paragraphs are justified, ensure that paragraph spacing is done appropriately, headings and subheadings are numbered appropriately. They just don't care. And that's a big problem. And sometimes we also have issues of system rigidity and lack of flexibility, especially when it comes to systems like this. The systems are built such that they are not accommodative of change. At least as we move, there should be certain features that we can add to the system. Because as we move, the HR function also evolves. So certain other key stuff would probably need to be included. So let's say we started with a system that didn't accommodate or have the function of steady leave. Employees being able to log in and apply for steady leave. As we move, these things should be added. Employees can apply for steady leave. Performance appraisals can be done on the system. Employees can submit letters or whatever they want to submit online or on the system. These are things that should evolve, that should be included into the system as we move. If that is not the case, then we have situations where we say that our systems are so rigid and they are not flexible enough. And when I mentioned the AI example, also is that form of use of technology for human judgment. We now tend to even believe what the AI says than what the lecturer says in class. I've had instances where I moved to class, the question is asked, I answer the question. People are looking at, they quickly go into their AI platforms to confirm what I've said. I mention a term, I explain the term, people go up, they try to log into the AI platforms to ask the AI if what I'm saying is right. So now we believe the tools more than we even believe ourselves and our human brain. And that's becoming a big problem. These platforms, these technologies are just meant to augment stuff that we do. They are not meant to take off our human resilience, right? Several other things that we have to. Also, the issue of employee stress and resistance. If the system is complex to use, of course, it's going to put a huge strain on employees. So, as much as possible, that's why we talk about you including employees in the when you are building your HRIs, so that you don't end up with a platform that causes a lot of strain on these employees. And also situations where they resist the platform or the technology because it's complex or because they weren't involved in the development of the system. So these are some of the risks that are associated with HRIs. Also, the HRI is just like every information system. It's just not about our internal environment, but we have to consider several other things when it comes to the use of an HRIs. Mind you, I spoke about the fact that whatever output that we get from our information system is used by just not the internal environment, but the internal and the external environment. As we say, the organization is made up of its internal environment and its external environment. So whatever technology that you adopt, there should be key alignment between the technology, your strategies for internal environment, as well as the external environment. If there's no alignment, then it becomes a big, because once you adopt the HRIs, government will, the government is going to be concerned because there are certain regulations that govern the use of technologies in every country, right? Your competitors are also going to be concerned about your HRIs, right? You are supposed to follow certain best HR practices. People are going to be concerned. Whatever regulatory bodies, the labor market is going to be concerned because you'll probably log into your technology or your HRIs to apply. Because now we are now moving from the manual way of applying for jobs to the computerized or online way of applying for jobs. So your HRIS is going to include that component where people can log into your system and apply for jobs. They upload their certificates among others. It's just like now applying to study in a particular university. You quickly buy the voucher, the e-voucher, which is made up of the serial number and the PIN. You log onto their system, so they have a component for applicants. That component is different from when you are admitted, you become a student, and you now have access to the student portal. There are two different systems or two different interfaces, right? So your labor markets are going to be concerned because they also need to log in and then also have some feel of the system where they're able to apply for stuff. So every HRI shouldn't just be concerned about the internal environment, but you're supposed to factor in both the internal environment and the external environment. Internally, you're concerned about performance appraisal, you're concerned about recruitment and selection, you're concerned about training employees, i.e., training and development, you're concerned about employee retention, amongst others. You're concerned about managing knowledge, as I mentioned, the knowledge management. All these things, you are concerned about employee morale, employee productivity. So you have to ensure that you consider all these things when you are developing your HR system, which is extremely important. Please, are there any questions for me up until this level? Are there any questions for me up until this level? Okay, so this is an overview of technology in HR, and I'll share with you the slides as well as the recorded version. I just recorded the session, so I'll share with you the slides and the recorded version. This is actually HRIS is something I like teaching because of the fact that I taught UMIs, and it's just having to narrow down on a particular subset of MIs. So if there are no questions, I think we can bring this morning's class to a halt, and then we'll meet next week, God willing. That's if there are no questions.